Welcome to part 5 landscape project. In this tutorial we're going to go over diminishing detail and also light direction. So as you can see, I'm starting to add more detail to my scene, and I'm using again sort of a landscape reference here that I can use digitally. Again, if you're working traditionally, you're going to need to have some sort of collage elements or a printout of some sort. But basically what I want to point out here is you can see I'm starting to build in these shadows here. Let me zoom in here a little bit. Let's see. So for like the tree here, I'm consistent in the direction of the light. I had drew it right here, the arrow, but I'll draw it up in the sky here. The light is going this direction here. So even though some of these rocks in here don't have shadows yet in the foreground, I was going to add some shadows here. And the shadows can go between the water and since I am working digitally, what's really nice is I can have like these little breaks of splash of water you can see in the foreground here. I can do that with the rock, so I can use the eraser tool and kind of have another break here, for example, in the foreground. So these little details really add and help a lot in terms of giving that momentum, that feeling of the flow of water cresting off the edge here. But when I want to talk about diminishing detail, notice that this rock range here, and let me just add a new layer here and pick a different color so it's easier to see. But this rock range here, and the sort of middle ground here, this area here is basically lighter lines in the foreground, which is up here in the foreground here. And having diminished detail is really important. Now you can still have strong shadows. You can see up here in the top left I have some stronger shadows or shrubbery, but I'm starting to break it up with the eraser tool. It's okay to have dark shadows, but you still want the level of detail to be simpler. So this foreground rock, for example, has a lot more visible detail than, say, the background there. So all these different elements, what I want to make sure to do is basically just make sure that wherever I'm drawing, that I change basically the size of my brush. So traditionally I would just make smaller marks and then thicker marks to the foreground elements, except for the shadow areas. So back here, if I'm going to add some more wavy lines for the water lines, I'm just going to barely touch the surface. Maybe in the dirt here, sort of dirt path, smaller lines going up here, same thing. Even in the mountain, I may add this darker element. I'm probably going to go a lot darker, kind of like this over here, but on the lighter side I can kind of break it up with some smaller little lines here to kind of go back. And to give you a reference of what that would look like, basically I'm sort of working off this idea of like a cliff of shrubbery, going up further and further. So there might be some dark patches here and there that I can kind of noodle in some detail. In terms of the tree, it's sort of foreground element. It is a little bit dark, I feel, especially some of the shadow areas here. So once I merge this tree layer, it's on its own layer. I would erase back in this area. I can switch the eraser tool on this one layer and just kind of noodle back a little bit. But I feel like it's a little bit too dark. Maybe has a little bit even too much detail, but I can kind of erase back some kind of lighter areas, some bigger highlights in here, and then seeing the shrubbery. So again, traditional drawing, you just have to plan around that, and kind of what you can do is draw it on pencil first and then go back in and kind of noodle around. That's kind of the way you'd have to work with it. But like these rock surface here, there's all kinds of detail in here that I'm going to want to add or suggest, but I can do that in smaller sections here. I can add some little crevices and details here without taking it too much further. And then transitions are also important. So transitions in the shadow areas to the lighter areas, adding some extra lines in there to kind of bring it about is really well worth it. And then again, the shrubbery here, I would kind of erase back some more details in here, kind of noodle around. It's a little bit dark up here. Now, if I want the silhouette image in here to frame it, then it would be fine. But I haven't quite decided on what I want to silhouette yet, so I'll probably figure that out in the next tutorial. But if I just zoom out here, show you all my work that I've done. Again, in the previous tutorials, I showed you how to do like rocks as foreground elements. I'm not quite sure if I'm going to do rocks. I might do something else as a silhouette image. But I'm really digging the way things are going. So again, we cover diminishing detail. Make sure your lines get smaller as they go back in the distance. And then make sure your shadows are consistent for the light direction. You can see even in the sort of mid-ground rocks here, I could add, just a few more shadows in here. Once I switch back to my brush tool, here we go. So I can still do it in sort of blotchier patterns, but I can add some, a few more shadows in here, maybe a few more in the crevices here too, kind of show off that, hey, the direction of light is going that way. Then I can go in some really fine lines and add some, a few cross-hatching lines to kind of bring out the detail. But again, most of the details should be in the foreground. So again, until next time, see you soon for Landscape Project. Cheers.